Welcome to the Tomorrow Today podcast, where we map the future of business. My name is Buhle Dlamini, and in today's episode, we are going to be talking about how to manage across generations and having a special look at Gen Z or Generation Z, depending on which part of the world that you're coming from. This is going to be a very exciting episode because I'm not going to just be talking by myself, but I have with me my colleague, Jude Foulston, and who's joining me. And we just want to have a chat and a conversation around this topic of generations. So welcome, Jude. It's great to have you. It's great to connect with you in this way.
Awesome. It's so lovely to be here having a conversation with you, Buhle. I know we're chatting about Gen Z, but there's a whole bunch of generations, right? It's not just Gen Z. I know Gen Z is a hot topic at the moment, but maybe you can just kick off with just explaining sort of why generational management matters, I suppose.
Yeah, Jude, I think when it comes to generations, you've got people in different camps. You've got those people who think that, yes, we definitely need to be talking about generations and that it's important. And then we've got another group of people that's like, hey, why should it matter what generation a person comes from? You know, like we all want the same thing at work. We all want to be treated equally. We want a fair chance at success. We want work-life balance. All of these things are important to all of us. And so, you know, we've run into this a lot where some people have a little bit of pushback when it comes to generations. But the truth of the matter is that generations do matter. That the era that you're born in does matter in the way that you approach work and life, in what you think is important. Yes, we have to take into consideration that, yes, there's different stages in our life, in our career, and those are reflected in what we want at different times of our lives. So when it comes to generations, it's really about understanding that Jude, think about it. What were you doing or what was happening in the world when you were about 10? Now, I know that might, for some of our listeners, that might be like a real rewind session to go all the way back to when you were 10. But really, it's really about thinking and understanding that whatever was going on around the world during the time that you were growing up shaped the way that you see the world. And so that is why it's so important to understand why we don't understand people that are older or younger than ourselves, especially in a work environment. And so, Jude, I guess a quick review would be that there are 4 generations in the workplace right now, and each of them have very different traits and different ways of looking at the world.
So I always love the story that Tomorrow Today tells, or the reference that we give when we're talking about generations, and we talk specifically about silent generation, the older. So my mom and dad would have fallen into the silent generation, and they always refer to the press stick or the blue tack on the wall, and everyone's got like a blob of every silent generation person's got a blob of press stick somewhere in a drawer, right? Because they have to keep it. Because of how they grew up, where it was scarcity and, you know, they didn't have much, and it was the Depression. And whenever I see press stick, I always think of my mom and that older generation. So Buhle, help me understand, or just remind me again the 4 generations that you're talking about. I think silent generations not so much in the workplace anymore, but what generations are you going to refer to?
Well, when we're talking about generations at work right now, we're talking about 4 generations. So the silent generation, you're right, falls in the generation that is now retired. So we don't talk about the silent generation or the traditionalists. We focus now on the baby boomers, and so that's a generation born, between the mid 1940s to the mid 1960s, and Generation X. Between the mid-1960s to 1980. And then the millennials, coming from the 1981 to just about around 1996, 97. and then Generation Z or Gen Z, coming from. So depending on which part of the world, some would look at that generation being born in 1996 onwards, and others start from the year 2001 onwards. And so, and you're absolutely right. And I think that the differences really come to how we see work. And so when you think about baby boomers, baby boomers, for them, they grew up in a generation where hard work was one of the traits that was one of the big things, because they would have listened to their older generation parents who told them that if you want to succeed in life, you've got to work hard, and work hard, And so that was kind of like one of the things that was ingrained in the way of doing things. But the baby boomers have been the longest generation in the workforce right now. And so they've kind of shaped the way that we do things. And so they prefer structured environments and so on. Generation Z, that's our generation. That's, again, sort of like growing up in a very different world where, being more independent and pragmatic, and work-life balance being more valued. Millennials have really come in as a tech-savvy generation. That was kind of like what, because they were the first generation that grew up in the world of personal computers and influencing their world. Whereas Gen Z are really digital first generation or digital natives. When you think about it, this is the first generation that was born into a world of the internet. For all the generations before, the internet came in after they were already born. But for Gen Z, they actually were born into the world of the internet. Think about it. I used to love that example of how when you would communicate between these generations, the older generations, a conversation between a grandfather and a grandchild. I'm a grandfather now, so I know what this is about. It used to be in the old days, the grandfather would say to the grandchild, "Come here, let me show you how the world works." Today, the conversation goes something like this: "Come here, my child, show me how this thing works," because this is a generation that, for them, top technology and it's sort of like the digital world is part of their lives. So in the workplace, these generalizations are quite important because they help us to frame and to understand how to connect with these different generations. But it's also important for us not to use them as stereotypes. I think that's one of the biggest challenges when you talk about generations, is that it quickly devolves into stereotyping, into looking at different people in the organization and say, "Oh, yeah, he's a baby boomer. Oh, I'm going to have to explain all the technology to him. And here comes this young digital native. And so I'm going to have to explain how these things that are not digital, or sort of like, how this hardware works, because they don't know how to use it." So we have to use these traits or values or ways of understanding generations as guidelines, not as rules or as stereotypes.
And I suppose a good example of that is the communication styles that the different generations have. I know for myself as a Gen X, please don't make me pick up a phone and phone someone. Like, that's the bottom of my list of ways to communicate. Whereas if I'm speaking to my boomer colleague or boomer family, they can't understand why A, I don't take their phone calls, or B, why I don't want to have a telephone conversation with them. Is that, we're not saying you have to, because I'm Gen X, I now have to do what the boomers want me to do. We're just saying that if you have a better understanding of the different generations' preferences or their different styles, it just is going to add value to the workplace. Am I right?
Absolutely. So when it comes to managing across generations, the key point here is about understanding that, by understanding the different values, because that's the difference. The difference is what each generation values in the way that they communicate, in the way that they receive feedback, in how they want to collaborate and work with each other, and in how they want to be led. As a leader, leading into the future as the world changes around us, This is why it's important that you understand the different generational values. There is a plethora of information around generations. I mean, you go to, for example, McKinsey Insights has got a whole section on Gen Z, and that's where the focus is. And so I guess for us in this episode and talking to leaders, of course, we don't want to talk down on to anyone. We know that you know all of this stuff. And you've heard so much about it. But the question is, are you really taking the time to actually leverage the differences of the generations in the organization? How much of your leadership style is influenced by understanding these differences? And so think about the communication styles that as you've just mentioned. So the different communication styles across generations have to be taken into consideration. The way that motivation and engagement is perceived or expected for the different generations is important. So, for example, recognition is a huge thing for baby boomers because that's how they measured success. I want to be recognized. I want a plaque on the wall. I want, I want that corner office, and I want the designated parking spot. Those were the big things for baby boomers. Generation Xers, not so much, still important, but not as much. Then you come to the millennials, and again, recognition is not so much about the big gestures, but it's about an ongoing recognition. I want to be recognized as I do something. I want immediate feedback. I want to receive it right there and then. And then Gen Z, they take that to another level, where it's like, I've just done this. Do I, it's almost like, can I get a star in a classroom kind of thing, And so it's really just about understanding those differences and not making a big deal out of them, but actually understanding that as a leader, I've got to continuously maneuver the way that I engage and the way that I work so that I really, really bring out the best of the people that I'm working with or that I'm leading.
And I suppose that, that talks to leadership styles, adaptive leadership that Tomorrow Today obviously talks a lot about. Am I making sense?
Absolutely. We've been talking a lot around adaptive leadership. And even in the previous episode, we had Gene Stevens speak really about that, the importance of adaptive leadership. And so adaptive leadership is really about understanding that not only do we need to think about cultural differences, but we need to be thinking about generational differences. And so that means that we've got to think about things like flexible work and remote work and asynchronous schedules and how important these things are for different generations. So as you go down the slide of generations from baby boomers down to Gen Z, or from baby boomers up to Gen Z, depending on how you want to look at it, for the different generations, those kinds of things are going to become important. Flexible work. Generation Xers, that's always been one of the things that they wanted. And now they really are excited that it's part of their lives. Whereas for baby boomers, it's not such an important thing. As you go down the scale, or as you go down the different generations, it becomes even more important. Think about it. If you're a Gen Zer and you have started your work life in a virtual first world of the 2020s, of the early 2020s, you don't have a framework of a different way of working. That is your world. That's how work is for you. And so when you hear baby boomers or Generation Xers talk about going back to normal, you're like, what are they talking about? What is going back to normal? This is normal. And so our leadership skills for cross-generational success have really got to bring things like cultural intelligence, empathy, and continuous learning in the way that we lead and in the way that we bring out the best in others. And so that foundation of understanding generations is quite important if you're going to understand how to lead Generation Z or Gen Z and get the best out of them.
Okay, so let's get stuck into chatting about Gen Z, because I think a lot of people fear Gen Z and how to engage with them in the workplace. I think that they get a bad name sometimes, and I actually think Gen Z are an incredible generation that we need to embrace. So, but remind me again, and just remind our listeners, who is Gen Z? Like, how old are they? And yeah, just give a bit more of a in-depth description of Gen Z.
Sure, Jude. So in 2024, the Zoomers are going to be more than the Boomers in the workplace, working full time.
Sure.
This is already happening, and so I really love that sort of like description of Gen Z as the Zoomers. I don't know if they like that. That's another question. But so when you think about Gen Z and again you think about the millennials that were called Generation Y. You might remember that. So that's where sort of like it went from Gen Y to Gen Z. Gen Y didn't really stick that much, and I think millennials stuck much more. Gen Z, they are the first true digital natives, of the workplace. Now, there's always different ways of looking at generations. Some prefer sort of like the clear cutoff dates to say Gen Z is from the 2000s to 2020. Others, the sort of like when you look at some of the researchers, they focus more on sort of like the period. So the other one says it's 1996 to write about 2019 is Gen Z. And so this was the first generation born in the internet age. For them, the internet has always been part of their lives. I don't know about you, Jude, but when I was in varsity, we had to ask for permission at the library to use the internet because I was part of the Gen Xers, and we had to plug in the cable, and we had all of all that noise. Now, I know for the Zoomers listening in, you probably don't know what I'm talking about. You can just mute at this point and come back and do. But again, for this generation, the internet has always been part of their lives, and so the key traits are, yes, they are tech savvy, and so when you think about this generation, there are many other things that also influence them. They were influenced by the era of, September 11, happened when they were very young, but the effects of that really lasted into their young lives. And the first generation to see, an African American president as normal, for all the generations like for the Gen Zers, it was like, this is normal. The American president is black. Isn't that how it's supposed to be? And so things like that shape their value systems, and so they're very values driven in terms of things around diversity and the importance of that. Entrepreneurial, adaptable. Some of these things are what we see. There's actually a great article in the Sanford report where Roberta Katz looked at the 8 ways that generation or Gen Z will change the workforce. And so we can already see that this generation is here to stay, and the millennials are still the majority now, but Gen Z is really coming into their place in the workplace.
So, Buhle, for me and my brain, Gen Zs are they're about 27 and down, give or take a few years on either side, depending of where you are in the world. But they're not. It's not the 15-year-olds at the moment. It's 27 to about what?
Yeah, it does go down to around 15. A lot of Gen Zers are still not in the workplace yet. So they're coming into the workplace. And so in our interview today, we're going to hear from someone who actually works with the Gen Z, the Gen Z generation, who's been training the Gen Z generation. That's the head teacher at St. Mary's, and so she's going to talk to us about that and sort of like about what's important as you think about this generation. So yes, they are in the mid-20s, but all the way down to the mid-teens is the generation that we're really looking at here. And
Okay.
I guess the question is like, what motivates them, Jude? You know, they are motivated by personal and professional growth. That's quite important. They're quite driven in so many ways, and so there's that entrepreneurial streak that comes through for this generation. They do want to work for organizations that align with their values. As I mentioned, that values are quite important. Now, someone listening in might say, but we said that about the millennials. Yes, that still continues. It's still true for this generation. But what's coming out more for Gen Z is flexibility is a big thing. That strong preference for hybrid or remote work environment, because as I said, that's been their normal. And so the way that they're looking at work is that no matter what the organization leaders are saying about going back or sort of like putting pressure, this is going to be just a big part of how they look at. And then I think on the financial side, on the finances side, sometimes the expectations for Gen Z are really not aligned with reality. Because they've been so influenced by the internet and social media and all of that. There's often this ideal that all of us are going to be rich, and so there is sometimes unrealistic expectations about what the real work and the real life looks like. For most Gen Zers, especially the younger ones, their ideal is to become, a YouTube influencer and make millions by just doing videos, which we know that only the top 2% of YouTubers get to that level. So they want competitive pay. They are growing up in the world where things like affording a home or the possibility of having a home someday is becoming a very, very slim reality for them because, we've broken the world, the older generations. Let's just be frank. And so there's a lot of things that are against this generation, but they want it. They want it all. They're not holding back. They want the financial stability and they want competitive pay and benefits, all of those good things.
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head with just balancing that, and I think they've got a tough gig. The fact that they do sort of see the influencers on YouTube making so much money and throwing millions at everyone, but then and sort of aspiring to that, and then on the other hand, they are adulting into a world that is really hard for them. So it doesn't quite match up. So then I suppose my next question is, how do we then communicate with them effectively when there is this kind of imbalance just from the word go, I suppose?
Absolutely, Jude. For this generation, communication, the preference is for direct communication, for authentic communication, for honest, transparent communication. They are susceptible to conspiracy theories as well, and so there is that aspect of don't trust authority, don't trust anybody. So you have so many chances if you are leading a Gen Z to really prove yourself. And the more you flip-flop, the more you say one thing and you do another, the more you're dishonest in your communication or you're not transparent, the less respect you're going to get from this generation. So, directness, honesty, and I guess, you might say, but aren't all generations like that? I think for this generation, it's even more important. It's even more something that they really care about. Their digital first mindset means that the best way to communicate is digital. And so the expectation of getting on a call to talk to someone is really something that should be way down the list when it comes to communication. First thing should be, reaching out using the digital tools. So in organizations, we're seeing WhatsApp and other platforms becoming very, very important as a way of communication. And then, of course, you've got your workplace digital platforms like Slack and others that are becoming more important as a way of communication. So this generation, text, digital, that's the best way to communicate in the moment. And also when it comes to feedback, it has to be constant, regular, and constructive is very, very essential. If like the way that we used to think about feedback for the older generations, you only got feedback if you've done something wrong. And so for the baby boomers, it's like no news is good news, right? No, for Gen Z, that's not the case. The Gen Z, they would quit if they feel that they don't get enough feedback, positive feedback about how they're doing, and they want to get that. They want to know because they thrive on those actionable insights. They thrive on that actionable information about how they're doing. And so, yeah, communication for this generation is quite important. It's digital. It has to be direct and honest, and also feedback has to be definitely constant and lean more on the positive side.
That's a good reminder. Okay, so Buhle, then my next thing where I'm thinking about is the actual work, the work preferences, because stop me if I'm wrong, but my feeling is that like a coffee shop is high on the wish list for where they can work from, which can be tough, I suppose. And this is all about going back to sort of the adaptive leadership, because it's hard to then trust, I suppose, and give the autonomy to this generation. So yeah, can you just talk a little bit more about their workplace preferences and sort of their expectations, I suppose?
Absolutely. You hit the nail on the head. The expectation is to be autonomous. The expectation is to be given that flexibility and that freedom. So two things are important for this generation: flexibility and autonomy. When we talk about flexibility, we're talking about not mandating where I work, but giving me that flexibility to decide what works best for that particular task, for that particular outcome. Autonomy speaks to actually give me the tools, equip me, and let me do it. Trust me to do it. And so it's like I can do it myself kind of mentality and mindset. And in most cases, actually, they work much better if they're left alone. If we just say, here's what is expected, and trust them with the process. Then give them feedback as they do it, how they're doing, what changes that they need to make. When again, technology is quite important. Like what kind of technology we are making available for them. They have so much access to the different technologies that sometimes they might be migrating their work from the company-specific technologies that are outdated, that are slow, that frustrate them, and they would work on something else outside it and bring back the completed process into the organization. Now, that has some huge implications for many different organizations with proprietary, restrictions and in place and all of those things. So, yeah, for leaders, think about the technology. Ask them what is a seamless tech solution that they want to use. and yeah, I guess things like about where they work, about the coffee shop and all of that, that's neither here nor there really for this generation. It's really about what works for me and so on. For the millennials and for Generation X, there might be some status thing that's attached to working at a Starbucks versus working at home and so on. For Gen Zers, that's still there, but not as much. It's just normal. It's not even a question about whether working in a coffee shop is something it's just what else is there, kind of thing.
Now, I mean, I can understand how this can really scare a lot of leaders around the world, especially sort of the older generation leaders, I suppose, when there is sort of a diversity of generations in an organization, because and I suppose that's why we're talking about this. So share some leadership strategies for managing Gen Z, please.
Absolutely. The first one is don't be scared. It's going to be okay. Because again, they really, in so many ways, they're so much more advanced in so many things that are important for success today, that sometimes it might feel like, what can I teach this generation? But that's where you'd be wrong. There are a lot of mentorship opportunities for this generation. They do seek guidance. They want mentorship from experienced leaders, but they don't want to be talked down to. They want a real engagement. They want a real communication. They want to understand some of the principles that are going to remain important going forward. So the financial principles are still going to be the same for this generation as they were for the generation before. So when you talk about the rule of 72 in investing and things like that, this is a generation that in some ways can do things better than the generations before. Some of them, if we with proper mentorship, they will be successful in investing money because they're really interested and they're really serious about it. I think for older generations, we always aspired to that. But when it came down to actually doing it, we're kind of like, we're always putting it off. I'll do it in my 40s. I'll do it. This generation, they want to do it in their 20s, and they want guidance, and they want to be helped to do that. So empower their voices, include them in decision-making processes, make them feel valued. I think the old way of working always used to be the more experienced, the one that's been here the longest, gets the biggest voice or the biggest space at the table. You who've just come in, your job is to fetch coffee and to run errands. That era really needs to be gone. That needs to be behind us. We hire these people in our organizations because they bring value, because they are valuable. Yes, we can mentor and we can teach them, but I think let's include them. Let's empower their voices. Let's give them the space at the table. And also, career pathways are so important to them. They want to know what's the route to success. And if they can't see that in the organization, they're going to leave. They don't have any qualms about loyalty or about sticking around. And they're not loyal to you. The only way they'll get loyal to you is if they know there's a career pathway that's going to lead me to my success. And so if you want loyalty, you've got to really invest in them. And I guess one of the most important things for us to think about, I would say these are the last two things that are important, is their mental health, because it's been a huge thing for this generation. So acknowledge and provide resources, especially for stress management, work-life balance, those kinds of things. But also give them space to collaborate and to be creative. So collaboration and creativity is quite important. So things that we've been talking about, adaptive leadership, inclusive leadership, all of those things become even more important for this generation.
Okay, so that sums it up quite beautifully. So thank you. There is one thing that I want to ask you, and it feels like it could be the elephant in the room. I know that a lot of other generations, older generations, will still, even at the end of this conversation that we're having, go, but Gen Z are lazy. Like, is that the truth? Like, what do you have to say about that?
So I don't want to incriminate myself. No, I'm joking. That is a myth. That is the biggest myth when it comes to generations. I think this is a myth that older generations will always do this to the next generation. It's always like, when I was young, we never had this and we never had that. We had to walk 5 miles to go everywhere and all of that stuff. While that might be true, maybe for the silent generation, a little bit for the baby boomers, the truth of the matter is, yes, for every generation, things are different for them than the next generation. So when you look at how easy things might seem for the next generation, it's easy for you to say then they are lazy. But it's a myth. The truth is that when you think about Gen Z, they prefer to work smart. So they're not going to tolerate doing things the hard way for the sake of doing things the hard way. And so if you have been raised, or if you've been working for 30 years and you've inherited this mindset that in order to achieve this task, I've got to follow step 1, 2, and 3, and 4, even though it doesn't make sense to have that step 3, just because it's the way it's been done. When you're looking at Gen Zers and millennials, and they're skipping step 3 and they're saying, forget that, I don't have time for that. It doesn't add anything. It doesn't add any value. Then that's where those stereotypes are going to come in. So they work smart, they prioritize efficiency, and so this myth that they are lazy is one that is that comes from, again, just looking at this generation and the way that they look at things in a different way. But yeah, I mean, I guess the biggest thing here, Jude, is that when we think about all of these generations, and especially Gen Z, we've got to understand their values, the way that they communicate and communicate effectively with them. And we have to create an environment where they thrive, where they can really bring the best of themselves. And so for leaders out there, we really need to change our view of Gen Z, change our view of managing this generation as an opportunity for the future of work. They have a lot that they're bringing. They're excited, they're ready, but they are looking for that guidance, and they're looking to us as leaders to guide them through the next phase of life.
My very last question, how do you go in? So for the leaders who are now listening to this podcast, and you've got their minds ticking, how do you, as Buhle from Tomorrow Today, go in and help? What are the paths that someone could take who's going, I should actually need to do something about this? Where do I start?
Yeah, so my work with organizations on understanding the different generations is really about helping them understand that there is a gap that we need to mind. And so for many of our experience, or for people who've walked the road with Tomorrow Today for a long time, you'll remember that Mind the Gap is one of our offerings. Graham Codrington wrote a book and a sequel to that as well. And it's really about saying to leaders, understand the generation gap, understand the gap that exists between generations. And so we do this through workshops. We do this through leadership seminars. We do this through keynotes, and just highlight some of the things that we've just spoken about, and now thinking about this new generation. So part of this of understanding is about learning to mind the generation gap, which is one of the topics that I speak on. Another one is about understanding healthy hybrid teams, which is really how to work effectively in this remote first or hybrid first environment that we have to work in. So there are many ways that I can engage with you as a leader in your organization. And most of the sessions can be done virtually and in person. So it's really, really a great way to delve into this topic and educate your staff and the organization. We have a very exciting interview with Graham Codrington speaking to Deanne King, head of school at St. Mary's School for Girls in Waverley, Johannesburg. And she just helps us again just to understand what should we expect from the next generation of young people. And she's talking from experience, having worked with this generation that's coming into the workplace. And so very, very exciting interview. Take a listen as we listen to some insights from our featured guests.
So thanks for joining me, Deanne. What is your one big thing? If you think there's something that any organization can do that would set themselves up to be successful in the 2030s, one thing more than anything else, what do you think it would be?
For me, that's people and harnessing the value that people will bring to an organization. I suppose also empowering them to bring that value into the organization.
So empowered people.
Yes.
Okay. So you are the head of essentially a people organization. I mean, you head of a school for complete transparency. This is the school that 2 of my 3 daughters went to, and I have been on the board for many, many years. But that's not the only reason to invite you. Tell us a little bit about St. Mary's School for Girls in Waverley, Johannesburg.
St. Mary's is a school for girls. We do have a few boys in our pre-primary, but it's a girls' school, so women of foremost in our thinking. It's an Anglican school and independent school. And most important, I suppose, about St. Mary's is it's the oldest school in Johannesburg. So in its original form, it was founded in 1888, so out of the gold rush came St. Mary's. I think what's important about the school is being able to maintain its history, its traditions, and then balance that with change, and it's evolved with over time. We embrace innovation, and we think that both of those can sit very well alongside each other, innovation and tradition. It's a big organization.
Yeah, and that's part of the reason I wanted to speak to you. I think a lot of people, everybody went to school, so everybody thinks they know what school is, right? But when you think about St. Mary's, and as I say, I've been on the board many years, I mean, it's people can look up what the fees are and know that there's 1,000 students paying those fees, so they can do the maths as to how many hundreds of millions of rands turnover there is. But the size of staff, the scale of the organization, and you're the head of the whole thing. So it's not just the academic staff, it's also there's facilities maintenance, there's security, there's IP.
Correct.
I mean, it's quite an enterprise, isn't it?
It is. So we ran from triple naught to matric, so that's a 15-year.
So that's 3 to 18 years old.
Yeah. And around 250 members of staff. And as you said, that's in all areas of the organization, from, I suppose, the basics down right through to teachers.
So Mary's is slightly unique in that you've got specialists in every field. So, for example, the sports and culturals, you've got dedicated people doing that. So, for example, for many years, the national women's hockey coach was actually responsible for hockey at St. Mary's. You don't just ask the academic staff to double up.
No.
So you've got a wide range of types of people as well, from academics to sports to psychologists, nurses, security.
No, I think we do realize how important it is to support girls. So this is not only about coming to school for academic lessons. Of course, that's our core business. But around that is offering them opportunities to develop holistically, whether it's in the arts, through cultural endeavors, sport. The whole support structure around wellness is very important. So psychologists, nurses, etc. So no, it's not, I suppose, a school in the traditional sense that you would have thought about it a few decades ago. But this is an organization providing as many opportunities as possible to children and of course appealing to their families, and then providing all those supports around it to make sure that it works.
And then you're dealing with all the same sort of things that any business has had to deal with in South Africa: security, electricity and load.
Correct.
Water must be insane.
Yes.
Because if you don't have water, I guess you can't have a school, right?
No, exactly. So you should have
all of those
backup
things as
plans
well.
for all those. And in the past few years, obviously, that's become more important
Yes.
as well,
Yeah.
that we do have backup for all that. But schools are complex organizations. I mean, governance, finance,
Yes.
risk assessment, all of those play an important part in running the organization.
And then to use business language, and apologies to, I'm going to say this and not ask you to say it out loud, but you also have one of the worst set of stakeholders on the planet. You know what I'm going to say next. It's the parents. Yes, any parents of school kids who are watching this, we love you. But, there's lots of stakeholders, right? Because the primary people, let's use business language. Your clients are not actually your clients, because the girls who are at the school are the primary thing you're doing. They might actually even be called your products at one level, and not that that's the way you talk.
Yeah.
But then the clients might be the people who are paying, but then they also can't have an oversized say because they're not experts in the service that's being provided. So, and there's quite a complexity in the system.
Yeah, there's a real complexity. And I think it's important that parents and schools form partnerships in terms of what we're trying to achieve. And partnerships they have some complexities to them and difficulties and challenges. But that, for me, is a very, very important part of running the school, that the parents know what the school's about, commit to working with the school, and then obviously the school seeing parents as partners in what we're trying to achieve.
Okay, so we might already have answered the big question that I have in my head, which is why choose people as then the primary thing that you think we have to get right. So there might be one or two things. We might do something in technology or IT or whatever, and we might get it right or wrong. Fine. We might make decisions around our facilities and that and maybe get it right or wrong. But if we get the people thing wrong, you're saying we stuffed. I mean, that's the most important thing, right?
That's what I'm saying, yeah. Yeah, I think you understand that schools need to be keeping up with trends. Schools need to be thinking about what the future requires of educated students that leave. So, resources and facilities, curriculum, skills, all of that is very, very important for us. But, and I suppose I'll isolate teachers. If you don't have teachers who are completely committed to what they're doing, enjoy what they're doing, work as a team, and bring a kind of X factor to the lives of their students, then we're not going to achieve what we want. We can have wonderful facilities. We can have superb ideas about technology and digital integration, but without the people driving it, and without the people committing to being creative, working hard, seeing the value in what they're doing, then it's going to undermine every other aspect of deliverable.
And what would, if there is an answer to this question, what would be the key or keys to empowering people? I mean, you kind of hinted in your opening statement that it was sort of getting out of their way almost, in terms of we know where we're going to go, and now you want to just let them go. But I mean, that might be one of a few keys. What would you think are the most important things in empowering people?
I think development. People must know that there are opportunities for development, and that the organization is committed to developing. It's
so not just do it in your free time, get around to it when you can. It's got to be part of the job. Yeah,
definitely part of the job. Providing autonomy. I think people respond well to that. Providing autonomy, but then obviously an understanding of the expectations that come with that.
So quickly define autonomy, because I think when we say autonomy, some people have a picture of the Wild West. Like you just let everybody do their own thing and hope it works out. That's not what you mean, no?
No, from within a very structured organization, to trust them, to go off and...
So trust is the key word. So I trust that you know what we're trying to achieve. I trust that you've got the skills, you've been developed, and I will trust you to do your best. And he probably also trust you to ask for help if it's not working.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, yes. So don't just keep going if it's clearly not working.
And then I think another thing is people want to be seen and heard. That's very important, and recognized or affirmed for what they're doing. So I think those soft things are also very important.
So that's something I wanted to ask you specifically about, because I think in the business world, in the corporate world, where, I mean, they don't have unlimited budgets, but there's more money flowing in those environments. I think a lot of them think the easiest way to just motivate their staff, just give them a nice big bonus, right? So it's just about the money. You don't have that luxury. I mean, I know at St. Mary's we work hard to pay our teachers as well as they can, but none of them are paid what they were. No teacher ever is. So it's an interesting thing to think about. And I think corporates have got it wrong. I don't think it's just the money. What are some of the ways, if you're not going to give away any secrets, but what are some of the ways that you motivate highly qualified, most of them graduate, postgraduate even level, where you don't really have lots of money to throw at them? What else can we do to motivate people?
I think people want to know that the work that they do has value in it, that it's meaningful work. And I think that motivates teachers generally, in the broader sense of the word. But to know the individual, to recognize the contribution that they are making, to engage with them about it. I think teachers really do react well to the leader, the head of the school, realizing how much they put into their work, what goes into the work, and then and recognizing that and making sure that you celebrate that. Trust, I think, is a big thing. I think when people know they're trusted and valued, then they will bring their best to the work that they're doing.
It's almost a virtuous circle, isn't it?
Yes, yes, it is.
They bring that expertise, which allows you to trust them, and therefore they bring more of themselves when they feel trusted.
And I think for the teachers at St. Mary's, I think they value the fact that they're seen as professionals, they're seen as experts in their field. They're not asked to do sports coaching, the drama production, if they are not equipped to do it. And I think to create a collegial environment is also important. You come to work, you don't necessarily have to be friends with everybody you work with, but it's a good, healthy, happy environment where if there is conflict, it's managed, it's mediated. So, coming to work is actually a pleasure. It's not a difficulty. And I think those are the type of things that mean a lot to teachers. But I think it would mean a lot to anybody.
You say that as if all the organizations get it right. And of course they don't. And that's part of the point of this series of interviews, is to just remind people. There's nobody who's going to say, well, people are unimportant, just treat your people anyway. But I think we need reminding over and over again that investing in our people is probably the cleverest investment we can make. And investing in your people is not about squeezing them for every ounce of efficiency and productivity. Again, I wouldn't ever accuse a teacher of having an easy life, but there's the perception that they have all the holidays and everything, but they don't really. I mean, a lot of those holidays are them catching up with prep and getting ready because it's full on during terms. But I think St. Mary's does maybe a better job than other schools of protecting the teachers from just overload, and being quite careful about managing the loads of teachers. And not just saying, oh, well, somebody's not here today, everybody else just muck in. No. And that's, again, what often happens. Somebody leaves in a team or gets retrenched, and their work just gets split between everybody else, and you just, well, suck it up. And I think, again, corporates have maybe the perception, well, I pay you well enough to treat you like that. You don't have that option. But maybe that's also a good thing, because it's forced you to then make sure you've created an environment that teachers want to come to.
Exactly. I think because of the knock-on effect in a school, that's so important. If you have teachers who enjoy what they do, value what they do, that knock-on effect is to the girls in the classroom. They are just getting a teacher who's engaged, who wants to be there, who cares about the students. So it is that knock-on.
Yeah. And what do you think the biggest challenge in education in this area of looking after our people and empowering our people? What do you see in the next 5 years as being the challenge that is sort of your role as head of school to deal with?
It's time and effort. So I think managing people is something that requires time. Nice. And a lot of effort. If you talk about, if you pay them well, that's quite something that can happen quite quickly. But if you're really going to affirm people, then it's about time and effort. And I think as a leader, you've got to be prepared to give that. I think what is important is being able to give staff balance in their life, because the expectations are high, and to produce good results, wonderful opportunities for girls to send our girls out into the world fully prepared takes a lot of time on the teacher's part. So how, as a school, then do you make sure that you provide enough time so there is balance in people's lives? I think more and more we're aware of balance and wellness, and so I think those are things that we can't just ignore. But they are going to take time. They're going to take effort. They're going to force organizations to rethink how we do things.
But basically you're saying that as the head of a school the size and complexity of what we've got at St. Mary's, your primary role is making sure that those 250 staff and then the 2,500 parents and guardians and then the 1,000 or so girls are all just where they need to be. They've got all the information they need. They're all aligned with where we're going. Conflicts are dealt with. That's the primary outcome of the job. And if you get that wrong, almost nothing else matters.
Absolutely. So my attention is on those employees, that staff, because if they are performing, if they are doing the work that impacts the girls and then their families, of course, the organization is going to benefit as a whole.
Yeah. So one final question, which probably should be an entirely separate interview. Don't be nervous. I think you've got it. But I can't have a teacher with your years of experience and your passion and not ask, what do you think we should expect from the generation of girls that are coming out of school now? I have a sneaking suspicion, and data to back it up, that there is yet again another generational shift taking place. This group of girls who are now young children and teenagers, they'll hit the workforce in the 2030s, the first of them, but they all experienced COVID. They've all had social media and smartphones their whole lives. They've never been offline. They live in a world that's more complex. The climate change stuff is front of mind. They seem to be very aware of that. They seem to be activists. And St. Mary's trains them to be activists as well, honing those skills. But from maybe when you started as a teacher many years ago, and you now look at this generation coming through, what should we expect in the graduates or however they arrive in the workforce of the 2030s?
I think they'll come with a much greater sense of their responsibility to contribute to society. That it's not, a sort of solipsistic future that they're going to look to. I think they're going to realize that for things to work around them, they need to be meaningfully involved in finding solutions and contributing to society.
So they're not choosing to become a lawyer because a lawyer is a nice way to make a lot of money. They're choosing to be a lawyer because they can do environmental protection or, criminal justice reform or something. So sure, happy to make a lot of money, but that must also improve the world and enhance community.
I think this generation have a far greater sense of that. I am an idealist, so
me too. So that's great.
And I like to think that that's what I see in young people now.
Yes.
But I definitely do feel that shift.
And their attitude towards authority, because they don't defer to authority, and they don't seem to fear it. But I don't find them to be rude or arrogant either. So they seem to have found a nice balance between, I see you, but I'm not going to just defer to you because you're older or got a title.
No, I think they expect people to earn their respect.
Yeah.
I think that they value trust, so they're aware when trust is broken. And I think there is a trust deficit in the world.
Mm-hmm.
So you have to really prove, I think, to them.
So you've got to show trust in them.
That the school is trustworthy in the work that we're doing for them.
That's interesting. It might always have been true of young people, but I think it might be more true of this generation. You get what you expect from them. So if you expect nothing, you'll get nothing. If you expect rudeness, they'll give you rudeness. So they seem to be able to pick up on your attitude to them and then basically give it back to you in spades.
So you have to make your expectations very clear.
Yes. And show them that you expect high standards and great contribution and goodness. And then that's
what you'll live that too.
Yeah. And that you yourself will live that as well. You're not expecting more of them than you are of yourself. Yeah. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you, Graham.
I'm grateful for the insights. And I honestly think that everybody knows a teacher or has somebody in the teaching profession in their lives. And I think that companies should take slightly more advantage of that, not take advantage of teachers, but take advantage of the fact that teachers are trained professionals who've got a real keen eye for the future. I think teachers are futurists and understand people, especially the next generation. Go and have conversations with teachers. And I'm sure, I don't know, you can't speak for all teachers, but I'm sure you are very happy to speak to people about what you do, what you see, and how you see the world.
Absolutely. I think teachers do love engaging with people in other areas or in other sectors.
Well, final word, thank you for all that you do and all that the schools do for our community and our society. Thanks.
Thanks, Graham.
Excellent interview from Deanne King talking to Graham Codrington. Excellent interview from Deanne King talking to Graham Codrington. Lots of insights for us to think about how we can manage this generation, what we need to be thinking about as we think about the workforce leading into the 2030s. I hope you got a lot of insights from that and that you enjoyed that interview. And if there's anything that you want to catch, go back and listen to that again. At the end of this episode, we've got also some links to some resources like articles from the Harvard Business Review about the strategy for leading across different generations. The one that I referred to earlier from the Stanford research. Again, 8 ways that Gen Z will change the workforce. So look at the show notes for some of those ideas that we touched on. Thanks for listening to another episode of the Tomorrow Today podcast. If you're a leader, manager, or just someone interested in how the workplace is evolving, I hope that these insights that we've shared with you today will just spark some new ideas for your team and or your business. So please go ahead and check out the show notes to recap on what was covered. And remember, this is season 2. So if you missed season 1, there's always a chance for you to go back and watch some of those episodes. Follow us on social media with the links provided. And remember to subscribe to the podcast wherever you are listening to us right now. See you on the next episode of the Tomorrow Today podcast, Mapping the Future of Business.